This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Authority Strike Herbicide from FMC. One application of Authority Strike Herbicide delivers a powerful one-pass burn-off to start, followed by extended weed control later. See your local retailer today for more information.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 is Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your work day. Hope you're having yourself a great week. And there's no better way to finish off the week than here with the RealAg Issues Panel on the Friday edition of this program. And we're going to have a great one here for you today. We got the OGs with us, Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture, as well as Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture, to really dig into the biggest issues of the week. We've also got a product spotlight with Paul Sinkevich with Vantage Ag as well today on the show. We're going to talk about Minister MacAuley's trip to the Indo-Pacific region. Was he right or wrong to talk about or showcase the fact he was dining on some great Canadian lobster? We'll also talk about how is the under 35 farmer in Canada a bit naive when it comes to what's in front of them from a financial perspective? Well, they definitely told us how they feel in the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, and we will talk about that here today on the program, as well as what the heck was Stephen Cabot, the Minister of Environment, talking about when he said that Canada's done working on roads. Crazy town. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about this week. I'm looking forward to it. If you have any feedback on today's program, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. You know, I've written about this before. Spring is in the air. As soon as we start to have spring training. Yesterday, spring training started. We had the Dodgers and the Padres, a full weekend of baseball. Spring training is here. And I'll tell you what, favorite sport. It's close with college football, but baseball, favorite sport. And it's great to see spring training here, and we're just inching a little bit closer to farmers being out in the field, as well as being able to hear baseball on the radio, which, quite frankly, is some of my favorite kind of baseball. So looking forward to spring training this weekend, very, very much so. Let's take a break, and we'll be back with the RealAg Issues Panel. Kelvin and Lyndsey standing by, and we'll be back right after this.
Want a product that will give you nitrogen all season long? Then you want to try Envita. Envita gets directly into the cells of the plants, and it's easy to apply, foliar or in furrow. Envita provides the flexibility you need for your farm practices. Whether you want to reduce your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain your nitrogen and increase yield, Envita fits your farm. Envita SC formulation is OMRI registered. To learn more about Envita, visit azotic.com. That's AZOTIC.com.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
FP Genetics relentlessly brings innovative new seed genetics to Canadian farms, ensuring growers, breeders, and farmers are supported and viable. Being a valued partner on your farm for decades, you can expect the continuous pursuit of the best genetics. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's strong portfolio of wheat, durum, barley, oats, peas, and rye, or contact your local FP seed dealer or territory manager to discuss your certified seed strategy specific to your region.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on this Friday. Let's bring in the RealAg Issues Panel. Up first, Kelvin Heppner. Kelvin, how are you doing?
Doing well here, Shaun. Catching up on everything that's happened this last week. Actually, the last 2 weeks. We didn't have a Friday Issues Panel last week, so we've got lots to talk about today.
We should have done like a 2-hour show.
Exactly.
Up. There's a lot of stuff to get through here. Also joining us out of Ottawa, Ontario, Kinburn to be specific, it is Lyndsey Smith. Hey, Lyndsey, how are you?
I'm doing well. And it might be a 2-hour show. You just stick around and find out.
Yeah?
Who knows? Yeah.
Surprises galore around here. Absolutely.
Yeah, we got a long list.
This segment's brought to you by Co-op. Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farming operation. Co-op, here for your farm, here for your family. You can go to the Co-op website by going to co-op.crs/farm. Okay. Busy week this week. There's really no question about it, as Kelvin was mentioning. You know what? Before we get into the ag topics, Kelvin, everybody, he took a holiday. Yes, we let him take a vacation, and he took his family. And where does a family go? The best family spot you could possibly pick. It was not Disneyland. It was not SeaWorld. It was not Six Flags. He went to Las Vegas. And Kelvin, I got to ask you, you went to, this is pretty cool. You went to the Sphere, which is where U2's been holding their concerts. How was that experience?
It was amazing. Yeah, we went with 4 families, rented an Airbnb in Clark County. Actually, we weren't on the Strip, so we spent a little bit of time there, but mainly in the pool and enjoying the warmer weather. But yeah, my wife and I attended the U2 concert on Sunday night, and just surreal, I would say, epic. It's hard to put it into words. You're in this giant ball with 19,000 people, and the entire ceiling is one giant screen. So first of all, U2 is my favorite band. I will humbly argue they're the best band ever. And the band by itself is amazing, but then the venue is just, and I don't know whether any other concert, the visuals at any other concert will ever compare. It's kind of maybe ruined concerts in other places for us.
From now on.
Metallica
if
at the
has a
Sphere
chance
would
to
be
go.
cool. I would do Metallica at the Sphere.
Oh yeah, and yeah, any other band would be, they would be awesome. And apparently there's a UFC event.
Yeah, UFC's going to go there, I think, in the fall.
I have a hard time picturing that.
I wonder what the visuals will be. But
gore.
But the entrances, like with that screen, when the fighters come out, wow.
I just envision a lot of blood.
And for the price tag, I think it cost, what was it, $2.3 billion to build? So
something like that.
It's a hefty price tag to get in as well. So for that money, I guess you should expect it. But it's, if anybody has a chance to go, you should check it out.
Yeah. My wife is still trying to convince me to get Taylor Swift tickets.
I would go with that.
She's willing to travel to Singapore if she could. And woulda, coulda, shoulda. Like the Toronto tickets, you could have bought them for like $1,500. I think now they're like at $4,000. Like you could have made some good money on those tickets picking up early. But yeah, not husband of the year. I have not got those Taylor Swift tickets. So yeah, cool. Maybe we'll do RealAg Radio from Sphere sometime. That would be cool.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, Lyndsey's never been to Vegas,
and I don't plan on going.
Oh,
so thank you for that.
You don't like paying $22 for a Michelob Ultra? What do you mean? It's fun.
Weird, right? It is like, that's just it. I am incredibly frugal. I don't love heat. Sometimes it just seems very people-y. So yeah, hats off to you, Kelvin, for taking the family on the familiest of family holidays to Vegas.
I'm going to be in Vegas at the end of March. I'm there for 2 weeks for 2 high school baseball tournaments. 2 weeks in Las Vegas.
Okay, please go.
Maybe you two will extend their Maybe you two will
run.
extend their residency and you can catch the show.
So before we got to get going here, but I do have to say this. Producer Jay and I were talking about this. He agreed with me, Kelvin. Neither of us are really U2 fans.
You're missing out.
You know what?
Too bad.
But I've never. It's not like I have anything against U2. I've just never actually paid much attention. Like I've never really got into it. I probably, if I did, I would like them. I've never been a huge U2 person.
I've been since junior high.
Yeah,
Southern Manitoba is a huge U2 fan.
Yeah, why is that? There's a bit of a U2 pocket.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think part of it maybe has to do with there's some faith elements to what they sing about and the themes that they sing about, and maybe that's where, at least for me too personally, I align with it. And that's one of the other things I found extremely interesting about the concert, if I can just mention it,
Yeah.
is the contradiction between the consumerism of the Vegas Strip and what U2 sings about, having it happen, like having that music, that concert, and all the 19,000 people singing these songs right there on the Vegas Strip, when it's like the epitome of consumerism and
dude, it's sort of like Garth Brooks in his acoustic set at the Wynn, talking, singing about friends in low places.
Exactly.
Friends in low places are not staying at the Wynn.
It just, Anyway,
the contrast is fascinating.
Well, speaking of consumerism and high-priced things, our Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food, Lawrence MacAuley, was on a trip to the Indo-Pacific region, landed in Malaysia, thought he'd dig into some Canadian lobster and let the outrage soar. People went crazy. I've written an opinion column about this, so that how I feel about it is kind of well documented. Interesting the panel has to say. Lyndsey, you first. What did you think? Is the outrage warranted?
No. And not at all. Now, we should probably, that's very definitive, but we should probably, first of all, sort of lay the groundwork of this. This, of course, most of this backlash, it's all online. It's on social media. It isn't a surprise that when you put something out on Twitter and, you're going to get everybody's perhaps unfiltered or maybe, over the top opinion on it. So I'm not entirely surprised per se, but I think, and maybe it's not surprising, Shaun, that we agree on this one, but realistically, since being named Ag Minister again, we haven't seen a lot from Lawrence MacAuley. Nope. He finally is doing what an Ag Minister should do, and that's head on over to one of our, very important trade corridors, areas, regions, sit down, rep Canadian product, open an office. Like, this is what he's supposed to do, people. And honestly, like, you're going to get angry because he finally does his job. Like, come on now.
Kelvin, do you think the reaction would have been different if it had been having a steak as opposed to seafood? But you know what? Okay, you answer that question, then I'm going to provide you with some thoughts after.
Maybe a little bit, but not really. I think the main thing is where he was. If he'd been enjoying this in Canada somewhere, then I can understand a lot more of the criticism of it being in cost, like a slap in the face for people struggling to get by kind of thing, and the whole cost of living argument. But here he is in an export market situation on a trade mission, basically trying to promote Canadian exports. That's where whether it's lobster or steak or whatever Canadian commodity that we want to export, whether it's high priced or not, hopefully high priced. To me, that it's the location of where it was happening that is the key variable here.
I heard from a few people from PEI, which is the province where Minister MacAuley is from, very upset about the fact that he was eating the lobster.
And maybe take the picture of you enjoying the lobster with somebody from that country, or like, to me, there was a few details. It was just a photo of him eating this lobster. So the idea of like adding some more context that he was promoting it to potential customers or companies that are interested in buying more lobster from Canada, that would have also made the picture a little bit clearer.
Yeah. So I guess one thing I've asked a few people that have emailed me with spark outrage and also called me a flaming liberal is saying he should have been eating a bologna sandwich, but I've asked people, okay, where's the line? What could he have eaten that would have been deemed acceptable? Right. That's the part that I think is a little bit harder to answer. I think a lot of political overtones. I also don't get the connection with the carbon tax. I'm not. It's fine to criticize him about the carbon tax, but the fact that he is doing his job and went over to the Indo-Pacific region and the photo was taken in Malaysia is, I just think we're crossing swords here and making this overly complicated. So, and farm groups cheered the fact that they have opened this office finally. Some have said, we're a little bit behind. This should have happened a while ago. But it's a very competitive market in the Indo-Pacific region, and when we think about Vietnam and we think about the Philippines, we think about India, just to name a few, there's a huge opportunity for Canadian ag exports. And if you haven't, just in case you're wondering, demand is an issue, and we're going to need the diversification of these markets here in the years ahead. Kelvin, Canadian government planning to support the UK joining the CPTPP. What's happening here?
Yeah, this is so the UK has reached an agreement with the CPTPP countries to join, but each country has to pass their own legislation before the United Kingdom actually joins the Pacific Trade Deal. And this is where the Canadian Cattle Association, Canadian Meat Council, and as of a couple of weeks ago, the Canadian Pork Council has also joined the effort, saying no, that Canada should say no to a bad deal because of unfair rules that will be part of this in terms of not increasing access, reciprocal kind of treatment for Canadian meat exports to the UK. And so in agriculture, there's some significant agriculture groups that are asking the government to not pass this legislation ratifying or allowing the UK into the CPTPP, to delay it. And this week, iPolitics has reported, quoting a senior government source, that the federal government is frustrated with the Brits, especially them walking away from the Canada-UK negotiations last month, but that Canada is still committed to ratifying the UK's accession up into the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal.
Yeah, Sunak is definitely down in the polls. Sunak needs a win. Big time.
Well, he's hanging out with farmers this week.
He is at the NFU meeting. That's a big meeting in the UK for agriculture.
And they've made some announcements. I think he's also trying to preempt some of the same protests that are happening in some of their neighboring countries.
Can I say that I think the farmer protests are maybe the most the reporting on some of this has been lacked so much nuance. It has been so simplified down to but it's across the EU. It's way more complicated than people have made it out to be. Is that a fair criticism?
I do think, there is different reasons in each country, different triggers, but I think there is a general theme in terms of farmers being frustrated with government increasingly getting involved in how they farm, and also governments also wanting to pull back on maybe supports that have been in the past. So I think there's some common themes, but yeah, you're right. There's some of it is protectionism. You look at France and Poland, some of the arguments there are farmers that are wanting to see more protectionist stuff. Some other places it's subsidies, some other places it's environmental. And one common theme would be the EU's farm to fork program, which the EU has pulled back on, but like the restrictions on fertilizer and pesticide use throughout the EU. That would be a common theme, Shaun.
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges here in covering it, and also in just the entire issue in general, is the EU is, yes, a union, but there are a lot of individual countries and individual policies and individual identities that are all potentially, as Kelvin mentioned, they're not a unified voice. Let's put it that way. Yes, overall, they're angry and upset with government and the farm to fork issues. But I think you're right, Shaun, the nuance or the challenge in covering something like this, it's a huge issue that has country by country issues to talk about.
Right.
And so it's really hard to speak very generally and apply, the general sense to all of this. And so it really does come down to, really it's a story in each country and overall. And I don't know that there's the media will necessarily to cover it as in depth when there's all sorts of other things going on in the world. Let's face it, media companies aren't necessarily as well staffed as they used to be.
Well, in France, it's about trade protectionism, like Kelvin said. In Poland, it's about keep the Ukrainian wheat out of our country because it's flooding the market, it's depressing our prices. So
exactly, it's different.
And hey, Germany, a lot of it has been about reducing subsidies. Well, as we're competing with Germany in a lot of the, in some markets, we should be cheerleading for the German government to be doing that because it's making Canadian products more competitive. At Alliance Seed, good stories grow with the highest quality seed backed by committed retailers and years of research in yield, disease resistance, maturity, and grain quality. Start writing the next chapter for your operation with Alliance Seed. Learn more by going to allianceseed.com. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we got a product spotlight with Vantage Ag, and then the panel will be back with more insights. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too.
Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
Whether you're a rookie soybean grower or a seasoned vet, the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com has exactly what you need to stay in the game. The latest research and the best agronomic advice from industry experts, along with local and global market coverage on demand, anywhere, anytime. Make this growing season your best growing season with the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com.
Co-op Ag Zone Field is a digital agronomy tool designed to help optimize your operation. Through integrated layers of satellite imagery, soil maps, yield data, and more, Co-op Grow Team members use Ag Zone Field to provide organized, timely, in-season data, allowing you to make informed management decisions quickly and effectively. Trust your Co-op Grow Team to support your operation with Ag Zone Field. Contact your local co-op today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I'm Lyndsey Smith, and it's time now for today's Product Spotlight. Joining me on the line, it's Paul Sinkevich with Vantage Ag. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing great.
We are going to talk about some really, you know what, I'm excited about this. We're going to talk not just about product per se, but we're going to talk about return on investment and really some strategies for incorporating new products into the farm. So let's start there. When thinking about your products with Vantage Ag, how can growers best incorporate new fertilizer technology into their operation?
Well, Lyndsey, the best way to approach this new technology is by looking at your fertility strategy in a big picture way. You know, it all starts with a soil test. It's really hard to go from point A to point B if you don't know where point A is. You know, once we have an understanding of the fertility situation, you know, that may include factors that are really important like soil pH, CEC, organic matter, base saturation. There's many of them. But once we have an understanding of that, then we can move to other things like, you know, what are your yield targets? What kind of equipment are you using? What is your history with fertilization? Once we're able to understand, then we're able to make a proper agronomic recommendation by nutrient and by crop. It's not, you know, pie in the sky technology here. It's stuff that guys can really get a good ROI if they use it the correct way.
Now, we are talking, of course, foliar technology. Does this new foliar technology replace granular fertilizer?
Again, it can, but again, it's based on sound recommendation and good science. Lots of information is required to make such a recommendation. This new technology can replace inefficient granular fertilizer in the soil, but it has to be done the right way. I'll give you an example with nitrogen. So if your soil has a low cation exchange capacity, say it's 13, we know that it can only hold approximately 130 pounds of nitrogen. So if you want more nitrogen in the plant, our products really can help you achieve that. Obviously, in this example, some of both is the best option. So again, it's going to depend on the nutrient level, your soil conditions, and what you're expecting to achieve.
All right. Now, you did mention ROI, which I think, you know, is a really key part of any of these discussions is, you know, it's not just what it costs or it's not just yield, it's that return on that investment. So what kind of return or ROI can growers expect to receive using this new fertilizer technology?
I think that's key with any technology. You know, we've got some new biologicals out there that are, you know, touting, you know, 3 bushel more an acre. Well, if that's costing you $10, that's not a really good return on your investment. Now, our products are value priced, and we can give growers a wide range of returns on their investment. The key here is, you know, the much higher use efficiency of our products compared to placing granular fertilizer in the soil. We bypass the soil, which means we eliminate almost all of the issues of placing that granular fert in the soil. So, for example, you know, we had a grower just north of Edmonton that used our new copper technology on a trial, and he saw 11-to-1 return on his investment. Now that's a really high return on an investment of $5 an acre, getting $55 more an acre revenue. So those are the kinds of things that we can do. We also believe that the ROI on some of our macro products can be even higher than that. So I encourage farmers, growers, when you're looking at new technology, make sure you're looking at the ROI and what kind of a return you can get on your investment. I know years ago in ag, we had said that if you weren't getting that 3 or 4 return on your dollar investment, it's probably not worth that investment. So I encourage, again, not to look at just yield, but also to look at ROI.
All right, and for farmers out there that are curious, that might want to know more about Vantage Ag products, where can they go?
Well, we're going to be launching a new website here probably within the next couple of weeks, so they can go to vantage.ag. And they're also welcome to phone us. We can help guys make the decision on how to incorporate this technology at 778-919-3370.
All right, Paul, thanks so much.
Thanks, Lyndsey. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers. Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on the RealAg Issues Panel here on this Friday, 3/4 of the way through February. What the heck is going on? We should look ahead to March, though. And Lyndsey's giving the thumbs up on if you're watching on YouTube because she hates February. I do not understand. February's a very good month. Like Valentine's Day is in it. We had Crop Connect. Kelvin went to the National Farm Machinery Show, the tractor pull. Like, what's with you, Lyndsey? I don't know. She likes March better. But if you're like Lyndsey and you like March, you're going to love the Canadian Crops Convention. It's heading to Winnipeg, March 5th through the 7th. This year's theme is Growing Opportunities and includes a stellar lineup of knowledgeable speakers and great networking opportunities. Check out what the Canola Council of Canada and the Canada Grains Council has planned. You can register by going to canadiancrops.ca. They're going to have David Hurley there, moderating a political panel. Kelvin listens to the Hurley Burley podcast all the time, so he's going to be fanning out. Also, David Frum, I believe, is a speaker as well, on top of many, many others. If you ever want to have a fun beer with me, I moderated a panel there last year with Chantal Hebert, and that was the worst experience of my life. So we can do that some other time, not on today's show. Okay, let's get in. So if some of you were there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Lyndsey, we had the Canadian Agricultural Human Resource Council provide a report. I don't honestly, I didn't think there was anything like big time new there. The situation's getting worse. It's the same solutions we've been talking about. I'm starting to question our ability to execute and fix the problem.
Right. So, so CARC released, this is their labor market sort of outlook for now until 2030, which it's not actually that far away. But this report, I would agree, Shaun, it touches on some of the common themes that we've been talking about for quite some time. And it does sort of feel like we just keep talking about the problem and haven't necessarily worked out a lot of solutions. Now, that being said, though, there are some pretty decent reports and bullet points of sort of what happens next, as this is underneath the strategy that they're working on for this. So there is some funding behind some of this. So we will see likely some programming that rolls out with this report in mind. One of the things, though, that I think was new in looking at this report is and we saw this week that millennials officially outnumber boomers in Canada, in StatsCan. And so this was the first report that I really saw outline how much retirements are playing into some of these job vacancies. And that is, farm level and farm succession and all that, all the way up to the C-suite, right? Like, we are talking about industry-wide. I think sometimes we get ahead of ourselves and we think just like greenhouse workers and, someone to run the combine at harvest, and we think very much just labor, but we are talking about jobs all the way from primary production, processing, all the way through to, on the business end. So I think one of the things that's outlined in it as well that I personally want to see more work put into is actually connecting where these vacancies are, so rural areas, etc., with, people who are looking for jobs and are perhaps new to the country or right out of university, college, whatever. I don't know that we've done as good of a job connecting, and I know that that is something that is on the radar, or at least in the works, for CARC and for other organizations, is actually trying to put together, job seekers with the actual job vacancies, and that is going to be a huge challenge of the next 5 years, for sure.
Well, the immigration minister talking about, Canada's addiction to TFW workers and cheap labor, that ain't going to help our situation. That just made my stomach turn, Kelvin, when I heard him say that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where that's where the responsibility falls to farm groups and organizations like CARC to raise awareness of this challenge and the impact, the consequences of policy changes. And I think in terms of making progress on resolving this, I don't know if it's realistic to expect to have made progress on this, or to even really see movement on it, other than groups like CARC, I think, have to highlight the challenge and continue to communicate and try to shape policy. But ultimately it comes down to the market, the job market, and low unemployment, and like we already have inflation in many different parts of the economy, and if wages are going to jump quickly to try to attract more people, that's a challenge in many different ways, and so, or not even feasible in many cases. So would put businesses out of business. So to me, this is something that ultimately the market will determine, but it's up to farm groups and people to make sure that government and policymakers are aware of the impact of their decisions around it.
I think, honestly, if I was farming in any of the sectors of agriculture, I would be full attention on autonomy and robots, and I think you just skip over the issue as much as possible.
But that's not cheap either. That is, like, in terms of cost,
fast.
Right, yeah. But it's not. There is a capital investment, but there's a much long-term payoff.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, and the other thing is, there's still so many applications in agriculture where a machine isn't to the point of being able to replace a human brain or a human touch or just human ability.
And there has to be a business case for it. So, for example, I've actually been trying really hard to find an automated, or at least somewhat automated, solution to one of our issues, which is fencing. And I've had a lot of people that are like, hey, that's a cool idea, but it also would have to eventually have an ROI on the development and the use. So there has to be, for some of our applications, our market just isn't necessarily big enough. So we need other markets to say, we also need that and have it developed. But yes, I think automation for sure is one of the solutions, but it's also not necessarily, we can just do that next week kind of idea.
The government at times says some outrageous things. I've mentioned one of them, which was Minister Miller talking about the addiction to TFWs and closing that off. What takes the cake, though? And listen, we also heard the Prime Minister on Ryan Jesperson's show in Alberta this week, and a little bit of a sneak peek. Ryan Jesperson and I are going to sit down next week to talk about that interview. So there's one for you. We'll hear what he thought about what the Prime Minister said to him, because the Prime Minister ain't coming on this show. But the peak, what the heck are you talking about, was not the transport minister. It was the environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, talking about how federal government's done with road infrastructure. We're good. Kelvin, what the heck is he talking about?
Yeah, I think from his perspective, he sees vehicles as bad and bad for the environment. And so anything that facilitates more vehicles is something that in Stephen Guilbeault's utopia land is not something that he wants to be involved in. But I do think it also seems as Liberals have fallen in the polls and potentially the reins on cabinet have become looser, or there isn't as much leverage that the PMO can exert on cabinet ministers, because it seems like Minister Guilbeault has said a few of these types of things lately. And of course, in agriculture, we know so much. We're reliant on trade and the movement of goods, and all Canadians are, but we, especially in agriculture, I think maybe have a closer view of it. And we know that nearly everything moves by truck and requires roads. And so there needs to be investment in roads. And we have massive, unprecedented levels of immigration happening into this country. So that means there's more people that need to move around to keep the economy going as well. And there's just so many unintended consequences again of this pipe dream of a policy idea that he threw out. It was, I believe, in French originally that he said it, and so there may be something around the translation also that we need to consider here. But
what are you?
I'm really
government communications. What is this? What's going on here?
So Trevor Toome at the University of Lyndsey. Trevor Toome at the University of Calgary did some analysis, and you can read it at the Hub. And he talks about 2/3 of Canada's exports, the value is by truck, and interprovincial trade, it's over 3/4 of our interprovincial trade by value moves by truck. So of course roads are important for us and will always be.
I think it just shows, I think, like, if there was, it just removes any tiny little bit of doubt. If you thought, that this government or that department anyway, whatever, had any grounding in reality, it just like zero doubt now that there isn't necessarily any respect for the actual day-to-day happenings in Canada. And I think that man just lives in his own little bubble of, like, I can do this and everyone should just do what I say, and they should just do away with reality and just think about, we don't need roads. I still want someone to make the meme with where we're going, we don't need roads, from Back to the Future. But anyway, if somebody could get on that, that'd be great.
Prime Minister's lost control of the chicken coop.
The cuckoo's nest? I think you mean the cuckoo's nest.
Well, one flew over it.
You're right.
The thing is that it's just like the part about that too was like his comments about EVs, like, and this is a government that's put in like extremely strong, aggressive targets on EV mandates, and it's pushing the car manufacturers to go in a direction that they're like, losing a lot of money on each EV that they are trying to push into the market, and then he creates political risk on his own policy by saying, EVs aren't the answer either. And I'm paraphrasing what he said, but it wasn't the be all end all. So basically,
not good enough either.
We're just sort of trapped in our 1 mile bubble. Like it's detached. Like it again gets back to this. It's never going to be good enough.
No.
You can do all of these things and say, hey, I am doing a lot for the environment, but for the likes of the Stephen Guilbeaults of the world, it will never, ever be enough to satisfy them to say, hey, we are doing a good job. There will always be another thing to disrupt your life and your business. And I think it's pretty evident. Hey, we got to take a break. We're going to pay some bills, and we'll be right back right after this. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. And welcome back to RealAg Radio. I know Lyndsey was talking about stealing food and stuff during the commercial break. We'll get into that in a bit. This segment's brought to you by Blackhawk EVO from New Farm. Blackhawk EVO is the next evolution in pre-seed burn-down herbicides. Who doesn't love a good burn-down? Powered by Duplasm technology, Blackhawk EVO delivers fast, flexible, and complete control of early germinating and winter annual broadleaf weeds, which we all hate and we all want to destroy. That is not in the ad, I promise you, but it is my perception. You go to newfarm.ca. Okay, Kelvin. Canola exports to the U.S. You've been doing some work on this. This is all last Friday. We were at the Cargill Market Sense event talking a lot about the CFR and talking about renewable fuels and renewable diesel and some of the opportunity. Talk about some of the canola exports because you posted a story at RealAgriculture.com. Very fascinating, some of the changes.
Yeah, I caught up with Chris Vervaet of the Canadian Oilseed Processors Association, or COPA, last week at Crop Connect, and the year-end numbers are in now for 2023 in terms of exports, and Canadian canola exports to the U.S. jumped from right around 2 million in 2022 to almost 3 million in 2023. So a major increase in Canadian canola oil exports, and of course, this is at the same time that there are new crush facilities and expansions underway in Saskatchewan. Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, and Richardson are all moving ahead with their expansions. There are two projects that were announced a couple of years ago that are still on hold or under review, one being that massive Viterra project that's currently awaiting, I guess, progress on the Bunge acquisition of Viterra. Federated Co-op and AGT also have announced plans to build a new crush plant in Regina. But in the meantime, we are already seeing these clean fuel policies in the U.S. driving higher canola oil exports to the U.S. And that's also coming at the detriment to exports to other parts of the world, including China. We've seen China not have as much value come their way in terms of our canola exports over the last year or two now. One thing to watch, though, is I think March 1st, we're expecting new rules regarding this tax credit under the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and how canola could potentially fit into the biofuel market in the U.S. and policies there. There's talk about farmers in the U.S. getting tax credits for growing crops that go into the biofuel market, and that's something to watch there in terms of a lot of this is dependent on policy decisions by lawmakers and administrators in U.S. government.
This is a bit of a controversial issue. Where I hear routinely from people listening and, audience at speeches saying, this is legislating demand. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't like it.
Yeah. If you look below the surface on a lot of demand for commodities, though, there's as much as, it maybe pains me to say this, but there is often policy and government decisions behind below the surface in a lot of our markets. Is traditionally going back decades too. Of course, the RFS is a prime example. It's been around for quite a few years already, and look at what it's done in terms of America's corn and driving the whole commodity complex in North America.
Yeah, since 2008, right?
Yep, it's been a while.
George Bush.
I don't know the exact date, but yeah, somewhere around then.
Well, when you come for facts, you ask me, Kelvin.
That's right.
I'm just Sean.
We go
on this one topic. Lyndsey, you also posted a really interesting story on RealAgriculture.com about Canada's and specifically Ontario having a hard time attracting big animal vets. Why? What's the reason? What are we doing wrong?
Well, a lot of things. Working with large animals, so working with farm for livestock, etc. Well, it's not necessarily a lot of fun. That's the first one. The other is that we don't necessarily attract a lot of people from rural and remote backgrounds into vet college because everybody's got choices. And it's really hard to get into vet school. So that's one thing. And then for those who enter the vet stream, they need to be able to pay off their student debt and make a good living. And frankly, the pet sector pays a lot better than the farming sector. So there's several different things at play here, but I did talk to Sarah Epps. So she's with the University of Guelph, and she talked about some of the research that they're doing and trying to get a handle on what vet students might need or want to make moving to rural and remote areas like Northern Ontario and actually set up practice, not just rural and remote, but also, of course, for large animal vets. So we do have a looming issue for sure with a shortage of vets, especially in places like the north. But this isn't just an issue for Ontario. This is an issue for Western Canada as well, and many areas. So one of the things, and we got some really good feedback on this story, both sort of inside the tent and outside, if you will, on the vet side, that, there's a discussion about, how do we make it more attractive to maybe move to the north or to set up practice in the north. But one of the key things that Sarah said, which I think is something we should all, as livestock producers, keep in mind, when vet students show up at your farm or with your vet or express an interest in wanting to learn about farming, we need to be welcoming, because vet students actually said that they at times show up at farms and are sort of looked down on if they don't already have a rural or farming background. And that's not really fair. And it sets them up to feel perhaps a bit like, I don't know that I want to have to prove myself every time I show up on a farm. And so they're not necessarily choosing to go the harder route of being in large animal practice. So there is a bit of a cultural difference that, from the farming perspective, we probably need to be more welcoming to students that are potentially considering large animal veterinary medicine. But one of the other things is money. And living in the north can be harder to find housing. The distances are more difficult to cover necessarily. So you've got a lot of costs to running a business that are higher. So there's a lot of discussion about, can Ontario, as an example, perhaps have a certain amount of debt forgiveness if people set up shop for 5 years in the north, or ideas like that of how do we make it more appealing to set up in more rural areas.
I think that's a great example of what we talked about earlier with the labor shortage. Yes. And that CARC report by 2030. Like, that's a prime example of a lot of the issues. And that cultural thing isn't just with the vet students. I think that's something throughout our agricultural community. We need to be welcoming of people and not put them down just because they didn't grow up on a farm or have a farm background.
Yeah.
We're not very good about that, are we? Okay.
We're not.
We talked about it earlier this week on the show. Looked at some of our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index data. Farmers under the age of 35 feeling much better about their current farm financial performance than the rest of the farming population. As you get older, it clearly shows that you're more and more negative about your current farm financial position, which is comparing today versus 12 months ago. Lyndsey, what do we make of this result?
I think people under 35 are smarter than me. And maybe they figure they've got the tools to weather this. No, I mean, it's an interesting data point that we pulled out. I think there's a lot to talk about around it. There's probably more to dig onto what's driving some of that sentiment, why it's more positive. There's things like, the stage at which you are in your business, how much debt you're holding, ideas for the future, and honestly, maybe your own skill set and how confident you are in it. Then there's the other side of maybe you just haven't been kicked around enough yet. So perhaps people who are in their, mid-40s, mid-50s, have a little bit more, I won't say cynicism, but perhaps a bit more life experience that dampens some of their optimism at times. So there's a lot to unpack, and I think I would love to actually get some of, those under 35 who answered to, the good compared to some of the olders to weigh in on why they feel that way, because I think there's a lot of reasons why they could.
Some of the olders? Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's us.
Okay.
By the way, Shaun.
Whoa.
Yeah, Kelvin's still a youngin', but you and I are.
Here's what's interesting though, and I didn't want to write a book in this post, but when you look at the age spreads on confidence in your marketing plan or your outlook on the market, age is not a factor. So it's not like the under 35s are looking at this and like, the market's going higher. What are you worried about? They're just as bearish as all of the older farmers. The other thing that's changed, and we did address this in the article, is a year ago, which was the peak of how farmers felt about their current farm financial performance in aggregate. I think it was a 117 and a 200. Now it's like 87. At a year ago, there was no difference in the age in the ages statistically. All ages kind of felt the same about their current farm financial performance. A year later, all of a sudden, age is a factor. Kelvin, it's interesting. So one could argue that there's more resiliency in the under 35 group, or you could say that they just haven't caught on to the fact that things are going in the toilet from a financial perspective yet. I don't know what it is, but it's very fascinating how that has changed.
Can it be both?
Well, of course it could. Yeah.
Like memories of the 80s are certainly quite faded, and we're already second generation away from that now.
Do you think the 80s is a factor here, though? We're comparing today versus 12 months ago. Why are we? Why? Because other people have brought up the 80s to me as well. Why are the 80s a factor in this?
Well, somebody who's only been farming for 5 or 10 years doesn't know how low it can get, and I'm probably part of that cohort as well. I've only heard stories of the 80s, and so I think there is some naivety that could be a factor here, but there are others. Maybe it's the time horizon. Maybe when we talk to young farmers about current farm financial performance, maybe their time horizon is maybe they're like looking not just at the next 6 months. Maybe their time horizon just naturally is longer because they have more farming career ahead of them. Whereas somebody who's in their 60s answering this question, they've got limited time left in their farming career, and they might see this. Oh, I don't really want to go through another downturn, and so their time horizon isn't as long, and there isn't as much room for that rebound or that optimism. And when you look at the long term, like to me, long term agriculture, we're still in a great place in terms of the world needs food, the world needs protein, the world needs what we grow, and especially what we have here in North America and in Canada. And so I think the fundamentals for our industry are still good in the long term, and maybe that's what young people see as well. But in the short term, I think it kind of depends on your time horizon how you answer this question, and the potential for whether you're looking at the real short term or a little bit longer term.
Interestingly enough, the largest farms, over 5 million in revenue, they agree with the under 35 crowd, also feeling better about their current farm financial performance than the rest of the farm. In aggregate, when we asked farmers, and we discussed this previously on the show, but if you look in aggregate, in the next 5 years, will we have widespread good times or bad times in agriculture? Very negative. So, Kelvin, you're optimistic about the next, the future and the long-term horizon. Farmers are not, though. Like in general, which I found kind of overly negative. But audiences have been explaining it to me that it's not a rosy picture. So maybe I'm missing the boat as I interpret it.
What was the time horizon? Sorry, on that question,
5 years.
Shaun?
5 years.
So maybe I'm thinking
long term.
Maybe I'm thinking a career worth of time horizon, like 20, 30 years time horizon, things will be generally better. Maybe it's the next 5 years.
I would hope so, or else that's a long career of crappiness.
Yeah, but that's where I wonder whether young people have that, and really to get into agriculture, we all know we optimists, there's a reason people get into farming, and why optimists we always believe that we can do better next year kind of thing. And so I think there might be a cultural aspect to it as well.
Yeah, good point. Okay, gang, we're out of time, unfortunately. Yeah.
We didn't get talking about stealing food.
We didn't.
Well, next week. Yeah.
Next week.
Lyndsey and stealing food?
No.
I feel like we need more context.
People in general.
That's a cliffhanger.
Are stealing
people
food.
in general.
Companies are stealing. Okay. Anyway, we'll talk about it next week.
Okay, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can find us across all the different social media platforms, or you are more than welcome to provide your perspective and opinions, thoughts, with a burr under your saddle, whatever it is, to the, you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And, of course, we'll talk to you again next week. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Authority Strike Herbicide from FMC. Strike twice with 2 Group 14 modes of action and take care of the toughest broadleaf weeds, including kochia, cleavers, Russian thistle, and pigweed. See your local retailer today for more information.